Nigeria is Africa's most populous nation, facing a number of challenges, of course, burning economic issues. These issues are complex and interconnected, and they are having a significant impact on the economy. Some of the most pressing issues include inflation rate, which remains on the high side, foreign exchange scarcity, while inflation has been rising steadily in recent years, reaching a 17-year high of 25.8% in August 2023. The country, on the other hand, faces a shortage of foreign exchange, posing liquidity challenges for businesses. I'm being joined live in the studio by Mr. Opeyemi Agbaje. He's the founder and chief executive of a leading strategy and business advisory firm, RTC Advisory Services Limited. He was a former head of strategy and entrepreneurship at the Lagos Business School, and is a lawyer, economic and policy expert, and a strategist. Thank you so much. It's good to have you on the program. It's the first time on the program. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good afternoon.
It's been a while.
Yes, it's been a real while. Now, I want to start with this. Finally, we have a CBN governor. Dr. Opeyemi Kadoso is there. But I must say, this is not the best time to be a CBN governor in Nigeria. I don't know if you agree.
Absolutely. But he knew what he was getting into.
Okay.
It was very clear that the central bank, and I won't be diplomatic about it.
Good.
The central bank has been mismanaged, in my view, for the past decade almost. Ways and means. We branded, or when I say we, I mean the central bank branded improper policy as unorthodox policy. Meaning that there was no rules, no principles, no thinking. It was just it was arbitrary, in my view. We now know that apart from the ways and means of 23 trillion that we were complaining about, yes, that we have also pledged our foreign reserves, mortgaged them significantly, as JP Morgan eventually pointed out to us. So our gross reserves appear to be somewhere around $35 billion. But our net reserves are significantly lower than that. We had the FX problems mismanaged. We mismanaged the market pricing process. We mismanaged the allocation process. And we created a problem. Unfortunately, it is in the effort to correct the problems that we met have resulted in the current explosion, I would call it, in the exchange rate. I have confidence in the new central bank governor, Mr. Dr. Opeyemi Kadoso. I think he's a professional. One thing I should be confident to say is that he's unlikely to abuse institutional norms the way we think that the prior regime did at the central bank. I think he would emphasize better governance, more careful policy making, behaving in a manner consistent with economic policy, economic rationale, careful thinking. In the team, we know one or two others, especially Philip Kiazo, and one of the other CVs, some of them look very strong. There's a particular gentleman who has a very strong macroeconomic policy background. So let's hope. Most importantly, we've learned in Nigeria is that it's not your technical competence that's more important. It's your values and your willingness to behave properly. So let's hope that this team will behave properly. They have current challenges, but I think that once they're thinking their values are correct and their motivations are correct, they would eventually sort out the mess at the center.
Let's shift to that. One of those challenges, which I know we'll definitely talk about, is the FX issue. And like you said, it's blown up now because in some cases, more than 1,000 naira.
Yep.
And before now, we've had that argument that it's a demand and supply thing. Let's allow the market forces run this for us. But that seems not to be working. So how soon do we start to see a convergence between these rates?
My opinion, and I think what the facts are, is that unfortunately, the government of Nigeria has floated our exchanges at a time when our capacity to defend the currency was very weak. Now, the policy remains the right action to take, in my view.
Good.
But we didn't know, I guess the government was not yet aware of the scale of the depletion of the reserves. Perhaps we were looking at the gross reserves of $35 billion and thinking we can defend the currency, and then suddenly we find, courtesy of deeper analysis and taking over at the bank, that the reserves are significantly less. We need a significant infusion of dollars into the economy. I think the government knows that. I think the central bank knows that. Ordinarily, in a normal economy, the answer to that will be the IMF. That's the institution the global economic system has set up for temporary liquidity injections to countries that need it. Unfortunately, in Nigeria, that's an unpalatable word, and I'm not even advocating for that. So what can we do to improve the exchange rate at this time? We've heard about the Afro-Exim thing, option. There could be other options. There could be multilateral loans. There could be, most importantly, the ones that we have within our control are to increase our oil production, to stop the so-called oil theft or minimize it as much as possible, to rapidly get new investment into the Nigerian economy, both oil and non-oil. Those are also sources of foreign currency. Investment dollars coming into the country means FX. Remittances, all of those, tourism, any system, any process, any opportunity that can bring FX into the economy will be welcome. Unfortunately, of course, in the short term, I think these things will take some time to mature. So we're going to, I think Nigerians, I think the message has to be this. We have recently taken 2 painful medicines, but they are in our medium to long-term interest. The short term may be difficult. So I think that would be, there's no magic wand that's going to just turn the Naira back to, I think the Naira should be around 700, 750.
That's what you think, it's appropriate price?
Yes, about the appropriate pricing. Yes. But of course, there's the activity of speculation.
Yeah.
There's the fact that the market now knows that the government's ability to defend the currency is significantly weaker than it thought and they thought. And therefore, in the short term, but I think if we do all these things that I spoke about, increase oil production, stop oil theft, seek foreign direct investment, ensure that those conversations result into dollars. All those conversations with ExxonMobil, Shell, whoever, the Indian investment community, let it all turn into dollars. And once that flow starts, I think that the currency should eventually stabilize around its appropriate price, which in my view is somewhere around that 750. And not $1,000, 1,000 naira to the dollar.
Interesting stuff. Preferring solutions to these issues is making it have another twist, and I'm really enjoying this conversation. Now, like you said, let's go now to crude, which we need to harness so that we can get more money. It's very important. But it's on the high side international market now, and we're having the effect on landing cost of PMS. Over the weekend, Moman is even saying that the depots are getting dry because landing cost is getting on the other side. Some even say subsidy might stylishly. No, they say differential sometimes. Market, I don't know. They don't want to use the word subsidy. So how do we strike a balance?
Unfortunately, I think where the country is, when it rains, it pours. So our exchange rate is devaluing and the price of oil is going up. That's a double whammy for the domestic price of petrol and other oil products. Unfortunately, that is the time at which we deregulated the market. So the reality, as some people have alluded, is that there's already a margin.
Yes.
Call it subsidy, call it differential, whatever you call it. But there's already, if you wanted to price appropriately, I think we would have possibly a socially and economically unsustainable domestic price of petrol and diesel and all of that. We see the price of
kerosene, 1,300 kerosene.
Exactly. So particularly petrol, which is the most politically explosive. So that means that whether we admit it or not, I support what the government is doing. I don't think they should allow the price of petroleum products to rise above the current levels, especially petrol, for obvious reasons.
Yes.
You don't want to destroy the economy and the citizens and businesses because we're trying to reform. We lost the opportunity. Governments of Nigeria, and I'm not talking about President Tinubu and his government, prior governments, especially the last one, lost the opportunity to deregulate petroleum production when prices were low. The best time to deregulate will be when prices are low. And then the citizens say, this deregulation, it didn't cause any problem. And then the thing becomes politically acceptable. Unfortunately, we got to a point where we couldn't even afford to continue with the subsidy scheme. We were now borrowing to subsidize. We were borrowing to pay interest.
The can down the road.
So at that point, unfortunately, it was at a time when oil prices were historically high. So I think that let's swallow the fact that there's some constructive subsidies somewhere in the short term. Unfortunately, even in the last few days with the war in Israel, oil prices are probably shooting up again. And with all the factors around the Ukraine-Russia war continuing, all of those factors, in the short term, we probably would want to manage what we're doing right now and focus on the exchange rate. If we get the exchange rates down, while oil prices are high, that can moderate prices a little bit domestically. So I think, in the short term, let's tighten our belts. It's going to be tough. But I think there's light at the end of the tunnel. I think we've stopped the bleeding. Because the Nigerian economy was bleeding on two fronts, with the huge dollar giveaway and the huge unsustainable petroleum subsidy. So the patient was bleeding. I think we've stopped the bleeding. Unfortunately, the patient needs a long period of convalescence and recovery. I think that is where we are today. But unfortunately, there's no magic pill. There will be short-term pain, but I think there will be long-term, medium to long-term gain. And that medium term may not be as distant as we think. It may be next year. It may be 2024. It may be at worst 2025. But I think that once we begin to accumulate our reserves, increase oil production, get new investment into the economy, those symptoms will start to ease, and then the economy will begin to do.
Let me follow up with that, because I think I wanted to shift to talk about inflation. What about refining? If we now start in-country refining, what impact do you think? Because some say that doesn't mean it could be cheaper.
I think all the analysis I've seen. So there are two major variables in the price of oil.
Okay.
One is the price of oil domestically in Nigeria, not the global oil price and the exchange rate. Will NNPC sell the major refinery we're talking about is Dangote refinery, which we expect to
Port Harcourt too by December.
Port Harcourt with something. I won't bet my life on Port Harcourt. But I will bet that sometime in 2024,
Dangote should come on stream.
Dangote should come on stream. The key question is, do you want NNPC? Or do you think NNPC will, or do you think even Dangote will NNPC is going to sell its crude, if it has, to Dangote at the global price of oil? Once that's the thing, the advantages from refining are marginal. There are some cost reductions, and the NNPC MD made this clear some weeks back. Yeah, there will be some marginal gains, but they're not significant.
Okay.
The most significant constituents are the same: the crude oil price, and then Dangote, by the way, is located deliberately, I believe, in an export processing zone, so that it is not a local company. It's going to be acting. So if, for instance, if NNPC, as we recently read, If NNPC is unable to sell crude to Dangote, Dangote would even be importing crude from the global oil market at the prevailing global price. So I think, yes, we may have some marginal logistic gains from domestic refining, but we should not create the hope in Nigerians that is going to make a huge difference. I think the percentage, I don't recall the percentage difference I saw from the NNPC MD, but I don't think it was more than 5%.
Wow.
So that's the maximum impact. It's something. If you can get fuel at 550 instead of 600, you will be happy in today's economy. But we shouldn't think that it's going to be some huge differential.
Thank you so much for that. Now, let's get back to inflationary trends. And it's not just Nigeria, United States, United Kingdom. I think the inflation...
Everywhere.
Everywhere. And that way of reigning inflation, increasing rates. We saw the Emefiele-led central bank. They kept increasing rates. We don't know what will happen with the next MPC. Now, let me ask the question this way. What sort of conversation do you expect? What do you expect... the MPC, the committee members, what do you expect them to put on the table when they're going to talk next? And what's your reaction to inflation generally?
Okay, so first of all, we should identify the drivers of inflation globally and the drivers of inflation domestically. Global inflation, and we have a table in my office that we update every month. All major economies of the world, inflation has been elevated. What was the major driver? One, the quantitative easing. Huge injection of liquidity into economies across the world as a result of COVID and the lockdowns. The economies were collapsing, so there had to be an injection. That over-injection of cash in response to lockdowns and the COVID pandemic, of course, meant that money supply was elevated, so that's a major driver. Then Ukraine-Russia war, a second major driver, with its impact on oil prices and food and grains. So those things transmit across the world. So people are trying to adjust from the inflation, the excess money supply of the COVID pandemic era, and then they now have the challenge of a geopolitical crisis, the war in Russia and Ukraine. Recently, we've had the war in Israel that's added to that. Now, domestically, there are some slight variances. First of all, we have some of the feed-through of that Ukraine-Russia war and the global oil prices, as we have just discussed, causing some inflation. We also have two other significant factors, I think. One is the insecurity, which is impacting food prices, especially, and the actions of the central bank. The ways and means and the pledging of our reserves, injecting too much cash into the system. So I think that if you focus on those factors, you would see why increasing rates was not the answer. The first major answer domestically for Nigeria's central bank is to correct its own actions. Stop ways and means. Stop excessive injection of cash into the system. It's interesting that I wrote this in response to Emefiele's arguments for doing the Naira redesign. One of his arguments was there's inflation. And my point of view was that much of the inflation was actually caused by the actions of the central bank. So we need to curb those two, deal with insecurity so that food prices will moderate, and then we know that the ones we can't avoid are the ones that are coming from the global food and grain prices, wheat, all of those things, and petroleum prices. Then we can but so for me, I don't think increasing rates is the solution. I think fiscal and monetary policy is where the monetary policy aspects of money supply injection in the economy, the actions of government around improving security and food production will have a significant effect on food prices, and it is food prices that is driving Nigerian domestic inflation. So those will be my own views on that.
Finally, what's your outlook despite these challenges?
Well, I have a fairly confident view about the medium and the long term.
Wow, okay.
So I know that GDP growth will improve. I know that in the medium to long term, exchange rates and reserves will moderate. The economic outlook will significantly improve. So I've already avoided one thing, the short term.
Yeah.
The short term is more difficult because we don't know when equilibrium, particularly in the exchange rates arena, will come. My suspicion is that equilibrium will not be in 2023.
No.
It will very likely be in 2024. It may indeed be towards the middle or towards the latter quarters of 2024. So, yeah, so it's the same message I've been delivering from the beginning of this conversation. The short term is going to be tough. But the right medicines, in my view, are being applied. We have no alternatives to those steps, and we would have recovery sooner than later.
Interesting stuff. I must thank you so much for your time. I have been speaking to Mr. Opeyemi Agbaje, who is the Chief Executive Officer, R3 Advisory. Thank you so much for your contributions to the program. We appreciate this and have a great week.
Thank you very much.